NFL upperclassmen might not see the field. And that's just a really weird spot to be in as a program. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports. On today's episode, we're going to be drafting the top 10 players on the Iowa defense. It's going to be a difficult draft because there's a lot of returning players, but we're going to base this draft on their NFL potential, how high we expect them to go in the NFL draft. If we expect them to be all Big Ten, all American this year, and their overall production for the 2024 season is how we're going to draft them.
Also, a quick request from you guys. If you guys could go out and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then comment who you think will go highest in the draft off this team. It'd be very beneficial to us. Those numbers help us get spread to a lot more people. And then finally, if you have any friends you think would enjoy the podcast, please share it through messages.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
We really enjoy listening to you guys or reading your guys' comments, especially for a draft like this where the first player is very debatable. We feel like we have a very smart audience, an audience that really tapped into Iowa. So we're looking forward to those comments and your reasoning behind drafting someone first.
So first would be Sebastian Castro. I think it's not an obvious selection for a couple of reasons. His draft value isn't going to be that high. You know, he's going to likely not run anywhere in the 4.4s. He might be even running the high 4.5s, if I had to guess.
Yeah, maybe in low 4.6. I have no
idea. He's struggled with speed, guys, over his career, and definitely is not a strength of his. But when you talk about a Phil Parker defense, having a guy in that spot where we're consistently inviting action to the flat, he sits in on the strong side to any formation. And based on alignment, I mean, when we had Cooper and Amani, you had actually more aggressive alignment with those guys because they had more high-end speed. But I think it's actually worked better with Castro because you can play him at 7 yards and QBs pre-snap just see an ocean of area.
Yeah.
And that invitation is constantly accepted and he shuts it down.
Yeah, and it is an invitation. And you think, I had the same thought process. Last year when we drafted Cooper number 1 overall in this video, he was, a first or second rounder, max second round. This year, there's not that surefire guy that can go in that first, second round. There is like 5 or 6 guys you could talk yourself into drafting first, just because NFL value is going to be pretty equal across the board. But for Iowa and the culture that this defense has and what Phil Parker wants and that invitation to, if you're in a shell defense consistently and you're going to be allowing the flats to be open, you need unbelievable flat tacklers and defenders. And the first piece of this defense that we need this year is Castro, because you go back to that Wisconsin game where I think he had 5 or 6 plays in the flats on 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 2s. And it changed the entire, course of that game.
Course of that season, making those plays. And going into this year, you're going to have the same responsibilities where we're putting 5 D-backs on the field. You expect, the bubbles to be open, but it's kind of the opposite. He kind of presents that weird personnel choice you make where it's a linebacker on the field. You actually should attack him throwing the ball rather than counter with kind of a quasi-run play to the flats. Well, he has the athleticism to beat a tight end, and Wisconsin kind of telegraphed their bubble shots. I mean, you look back to the game prior, Michigan State did a great job of motioning to those bubble shots. We broke that down in a previous video.
Yeah. But
with how Iowa plays defense, it is such an odd thing for an offensive coordinator to come up against because you are seeing such a passive look. And the flats seem so available, but then these guys consistently make tackle after tackle. Not only are they, making a tackle for, 0 yards after the extra guy gets hit, but you're also opening up the possibility of a fumble.
And injury. And my second note was this guy's a tone setter for the entire team. And there's the thing about football. If you see a thumper on film and you see a guy who consistently lays the wood, you make note of him before the play starts. If you're a QB, you're doing the same thing because you're like, I can't throw over the middle. He might kill my guy. And I can't imagine watching a Iowa defense on film and just seeing, 5 or 6 hits a game by Castro. You're like, that has to be close to knockout or close to concussion every hit. And he's like a boxer where he just keeps on getting up and he gets up before the guy he hits.
And there's not a lot of celebration to it too. You'll see him occasionally give a fist bump, but when a dude goes out and murders someone and then has no reaction to it,
turns around.
That's the darkest thing you can see on the field.
And sprints back sometimes. And you're just like, that guy he just took a huge hit.
Yeah.
And it felt like it didn't impact him at all.
But the final point before we move on, I think where we'll see him continue to evolve and where we saw him take a giant leap last year was in pass defense. Obviously, he had the giant pick against Iowa State that essentially ended that game in the first half.
Yep.
If he's going to make the leap to the NFL, that's going to have to be a calling card for him.
Yeah.
He's likely going to end up at strong safety in the NFL. That they're not going to make him a corner. They're not going to make him a slot corner. So, but having that game of his still develop, that's where he could enter into a top 4 round pick.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the playmaking. If he can be a better playmaker this year, defensive back of the year, Tatum Woodson Award, it's a possibility with the hype he's coming in with, and how well he's going to play. NFL draft pick, both take playmaking to take that next level. But I think I'm up next now.
Yeah.
Once again, I think the top 5 picks, you have an argument for all of them. I'm going to go with another safety. I'm going to go with Xavier Wampa. And it's just based on, when he produces at the combine, when he goes and runs his 40 and they measure his height and weight and he runs his vertical or does his vertical, he's just going to jump off the page and his RAS score. And he's going to be an Iowa coach defender. And the only thing that's holding me back from drafting him second is that he doesn't really have the splash plays that he had last year, but he made the biggest splash play of the year last year in the first game of the season versus Utah State. And, having that incredible play in the first game and on film for every single offense coordinator to see, I think it stopped people from attacking him.
Well, in that play, it was a cover 3 look seam shot. Yeah. Whereas if you're going to attack cover 3, that's where you go, is you go to the seam. He was even moving away from that guy as the play was occurring.
Yep.
So you're essentially designing a play that is the most difficult play for that safety to make, and he made it comfortable. Mm-hmm. He ate the ball, as we'd say. I think for safety play, the better thing to look at is the lack of targets he's receiving. You can probably count on your hand how many times a play was targeted at him. Penn State, they scored a touchdown on him.
I'd say less than a handful.
I'd say 3 or 4 where I felt they had any level of attack.
Yeah.
I think we might see almost 0 this year. And then, but from a run defense perspective, that's where this guy becomes so valuable. Is you have essentially an extra linebacker back there. And we've made this point during the prior year's podcast, but the secondary this year in general, it's like having 3 or 4 extra linebackers on the field. And that's why you're seeing these, gaudy yards per play numbers. It's because even if you do break it to the second level, you're going down in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that's where this defense really has a chance to excel again, is just being an exceptionally good tackling team. Yeah. That's where X is, prime example of what you want to safety.
And it's not, I think yards per play is like, it's tackling, of course. It's like, stopping plays from being a 4-yard play to an 8-yard play, but it's also the 80-yard play. That's what kills you. Is the explosive plays, and during a game is what your yards per play actually gets skewed by. It's what Phil Parker knows. But it's just all the safeties. You talk about Wampa's tackling ability, but his coverage ability. How many times did he get beat deep for a 30-yard catch? I don't remember one opportunity for that. And as a safety, that's impressive. And then you think of also, we're going to bring up Quinn Schulte later, but like both those safeties plays, like they're so good at staying on their back foot. Like we have not seen them in the last 2 years be beat by a double move, which, you can go back to even really good, like Jack Corner was our best free safety of the decade. He had 2 or 3 in his first year.
Yeah, really back-breaking plays too.
Yeah, blew his assignment in his first 3 games, and like neither of these guys have had any of those. So it's like, if you want to go to one position group of why Iowa's had such consistency in yards per play and just overall points, it's like the safeties have had essentially 0 breakdowns in 2 years.
And a big piece of this too is that he was a true sophomore last year. Usually you'll see these guys start to play at a really high level as they come upperclassmen. We might see a completely different X this year than we saw last year, just because he's growing up in the system.
Definitely.
He's going to play with a lot more confidence. He's always was not a guy who struggled with confidence, but there's always evolutions in these early years that are far greater than you'll see, from a redshirt to redshirt senior year, or a redshirt junior to redshirt senior year.
He's not maxed out.
Exactly.
I think you're up for next.
We are thrilled to announce a new sponsor of the ANF Podcast. Next time you're looking for an all-inclusive beach vacation, consider Via Puesta del Sol or Via Puerto Escondido, both of which overlook the Pacific Ocean in Ocotal, Costa Rica, providing an exceptional all-inclusive experience for your family and friends. And if you mention the ANF Podcast when booking, you'll get 5% off your stay. Visit their website, linked down below, for more information or to reserve your trip today.
Yeah. At this point, it's difficult because I really want to go Higgins. Mm-hmm. I think for most Iowa fans, they'd probably expect him to be a top 3 player. I think he was just listed as a preseason first-team All-American today. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with Graves, kind of under the same line I think as X. Mm-hmm. D-tackle is an overly valued NFL position, but there hasn't been a D-tackle within the Iowa program that has got on the field as a sophomore or as a true sophomore and played at the level he has.
Yeah. Maybe since Mike Daniels.
Yeah, but he was also playing as a backup at that time.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniels didn't really, he didn't start. I guess Graves hasn't either. But
yeah.
I mean, you look back to the Iowa State game last year. How many drives did he end by himself? Purdue, so many other games. And the fact that he was dominating upperclassmen O-linemen on the interior at that age, I think we're going to see another dramatic growth in that facet. Because we've seen backup D tackles under Phil's system struggle forever.
Yeah.
I've never really seen, especially an underclassman backup D tackle, come in and hold his own against double teams, really dominate one-on-one blocks the way he needs to, and understand the scheme as a whole as well as he has. And then you just extrapolate that out for another season. And it's really difficult to see how he isn't, entering that Davion Nixon realm of dominant D tackle play.
Yeah.
Especially at the 3 technique. That position allows for a lot more aggressive behavior, a lot more playmaking.
More one-on-one.
More one-on-one. When you're playing the 1, you're getting doubled almost every single play. Within the 3, that allows for more pass rushes too. And I think a point we're going to make as we go through this list is that we're actually going to likely see a lot of our action occurring in the pass rush department is going to be at that 3 tech position with him and Brian Allen.
The one thing I would push back on that, just for like drafting Graves at 3, is it's a weird position where we don't have a lot of draft picks from our D tackles. And it's actually had not a lot of success either.
David Nixon, Davion Nixon.
He kind of struggled to have his second contract. Nixon's going to be in the kind of difficult to get a second contract. You had to kind of go back to Daniels and Carl Klug to have kind of D tackle success. So even if he is, probably the most exceptional D tackle we've had in the last 10 years at this age, you can also argue Higgins over, who is my next pick, that he has more likelihood to make a second contract to Graves just because on NFL GMs, you have Josie Jewell and Campbell, essentially back-to-back middle linebackers that, they're going to play until they don't want to. And I think Higgins has a really good opportunity to be a 3rd or 4th rounder where, some GM sees him as we can grab him in the 3rd round. He'll start for 4 years guaranteed. He'll make 100 tackles every year. He'll play the position perfectly. And, essentially treat him like a running back. Do we pay him a second contract? Who knows? But I think that definitely is a role he could play. And going to Higgins last year is probably the best.
Are you drafting Higgins?
Yeah, I said I was going to draft.
Okay.
I mentioned it.
Okay.
But yeah, I drafted Higgins, and truly his last year as middle linebacker was probably the best first-year middle linebacker play we've had in the last 10 years.
I mean, who is the comparison of Quentin Alston in 20?
Well, I'm just Campbell 2019.
Oh, but upperclassmen, you have kind of to compare him to upperclassmen.
Christian Welch,
Quentin Alston.
Yeah.
Who came after James Morris? I think there was a senior. Maybe that was Quentin Alston.
It was Alston.
I think it's just those two guys.
No.
Jack Hawkeye before he got pulled.
Yeah, it was Alston. Yeah.
Amani Jones. But all those guys, besides Welch, flamed out at the middle linebacker position. Alston and Amani Jones were not good.
Yeah.
As upperclassmen. They kind of waited their turn, and then they came in and did not play at a high level. And that was our fear going into last season.
Oh, he was a big, I think I meant a point before Utah State was my number one concern is middle linebacker. We've never seen this happen.
In the spot time that he played, he did not play that well.
Yeah.
He was playing at weak side, which is a little bit out of position just because he isn't that super agile guy, the speed guy, plays ball in space. But you get him between C, B, and A, and he's exceptional.
Yeah, and just for him to come in and play that well, it was so surprising. Right away, we were Higgins, question mark, completely answered. And to have, nearly, I can't remember if he was first team all Big Ten, but he was close to it. Now having been the defensive player of the year for Phil Steele, if you told me that a year ago, I thought no way that would happen.
Well, when you get anointed early in the college football, award universe, he's going to have the numbers behind him.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to stack up another 130, 140 tackles.
He had 170 last year total.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
If he does anywhere close to that again, that 120 plus, Buckeyes is going to be within reach of his. Big Ten linebacker of the year is going to be reach. First team all Big Ten, first team all American. All that's going to be within reach for him. I think that is the selling card that they had for him. And also just how much more he could improve. You just had your first year of real tape on yourself. By game 6, you're starting to kind of figure out where your holes are.
Yeah.
If you could make that jump where you're not going to get drafted as a 6th rounder, which you probably would have been last year, 5th or 6th round. But now you have a pedigree behind you. Maybe you're on a really good defense. They're trying to find where was the magic sauce in this.
Yeah.
Then you have the accolades stacked on top of that. I mean, Jack Campbell, if he leaves after his junior year, where do you think he goes? 3rd round?
Maybe later. Maybe 4th, 5th.
Yeah. But then you have the Butkus Award winner. Right. You have an unreal defense.
Pre-draft buzz is a thing. Pre-draft, like preseason buzz is enormous.
Especially a position like linebacker. Because they have to find a reason to choose one of you. Mm-hmm. And having accolades stacked up on you, they're inherently going to go look to you first. And if they see what they like on tape, that's a really big thing for him.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think just going into his style of play, we had concerns around his mobility and agility at the front of the year. But what he showed in the tackling department, I've never seen a guy. I mean, Josie was special in that regard where he could ragdoll guys, but it is just like a Family Guy hit scene when Higgins hit guys. It's just hit down every single time. Yeah. I don't think I remember him missing a tackle all season.
Yeah.
Josie had a fair amount of missed tackles as well. But where I think he really shined, which I did not expect either, because this is usually something that takes a long time to develop, was his pass defense. Mm-hmm. He was very anticipatory with cuts coming over the middle on him. You could always see him sniffing out where they're going to attack him, which is really difficult to do at that
next
position,
level stuff,
especially with the lack of experience he had. But that's why you saw them trying to get him on the field when there was Campbell, Benson, and Jacobs already in the room.
Yeah, they rotate him out for no reason.
For no reason other than they thought he was playing at such a high level.
Yeah, and he had the play of the year. That 3rd and goal stop against Northwestern, I still don't know how he did. I watched it a week back and was like, this is just...
That's a heroic
240-pound man coming at 8 yards of sprinting, and you just stuck him.
Mm-hmm. Just perfect for him.
Yeah.
And then Ock strong.
Yeah. I think you're up next for this pick. This way, it gets
I'll go back to D tackle. Mm-hmm. I think Yaya Black, again, he's even a bigger build than Graves is, so you could theoretically talk yourself into him being like 325, 330 at the NFL level, being a true one technique, even being a true nose tackle. He moves well enough. He's obviously technically sound enough, playing within the Iowa system. Mm-hmm. He's not going to run exceptionally well, but that usually doesn't play that well. Like Jalen Carter, I don't think usually top. Mm-hmm.
Any D tackle they're going to draft high is going to move pretty well. But
I think he still has a chance to jump into the top 3 or 4 rounds, even without having gaudy numbers, just because he's such a big dude. Yeah. He's going to have an insane wingspan and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But where his true skill set at is just how well he manages double teams. Mm-hmm. And at that size, we haven't had really a high end one technique in a while. I mean, you had Jack Heflin for a year, but prior to that, you really had struggled to find that plug in the middle. Yeah. And Yaya has filled that role in such a dramatic fashion.
Yeah, I can't remember last time we were this confident about our starting 2D tackles heading into a year, maybe in last year, but just both of them having NFL potential, both having a year of full experience under them, and just the builds they have. You have a real opportunity to, repeat the run defense you had last year, which we mentioned at the end of last year's pod. Our D tackle play won us 10 games. The yards per play is also directly correlated to our defensive line, probably lost 5 or 6 drives an entire year, it felt like, on a consistent basis. And if you did see success against D tackles, generally they would have a counter play or they'd, stand strong the next 3 set of downs. It was rare to have D tackles be moved for an entire drive outside of the Tennessee game, which was kind of shocking. Maybe they lost their will, but the D tackles between Graves and Yahweh were incredible.
Well, I think that is the reason I'm drafting him so high.
Yeah.
The whole defense is predicated around the 2 D tackles. Mm-hmm. What allows them to be so passive in their alignment and to have linebackers that line up 6-7 yards deep behind them is because you have to have such strong willed players who also aren't seeking their own accolades. These guys aren't going to put up stats. They're simply there to eat blockers. Right. And it's even more dramatic with an Iowa system than your typical college football system.
And that's why if you're not a hardcore fan, bringing up Black and Graves, on this Iowa team, you're no, Higgins for sure above them, or Nick Jackson or someone else. But it's because these guys aren't going to flash on film, because you're not going to have those moments of, oh, he swam the center and he made the play in 3 yards in the backfield. And oh, I see his name now. It's these guys are kind of unheralded guys in this defense because they do the dirty work that gets no credit, and you're never going to see them. And it's good if you don't see them. You don't see them getting moved 7 yards by a double team.
Well, that's probably why they also struggle to recruit it at a high level, but then also why they don't have a lot of draft picks coming out of there. It's because you don't have these really high TFL numbers.
Yeah.
Most of the really high level D tackles finish the season with 12, 13 and a half D tackles for losses. Outside of Nixon, who was, the reason it took so long for Nixon to get on the field is because he played outside the system.
Yeah.
And he did guess a lot.
Well, that's like the issue with Iowa can like develop certain positions really well, like tight end, because you can get 3 stars and turn into 5 stars. 5-star D tackles are 5-star D tackles. Like you're not going to develop a 5-star D tackle.
Yeah. Is he the strongest, biggest dude on the planet?
And fast and, quick. Like that. It's kind of like the offensive tackle, D tackle are kind of the same builds where we used to build those type of athletes, but like other programs are getting really good at developing them, and we're just not getting the caliber. You just can't turn.
And there's only like 12 of them in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a rare body type.
Yeah, and I think that's why we see the numbers we do in offensive tackle too. I mean, you see all of our tackles play guard.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many D tackles in the league simply just come out of Georgia and Alabama and Clemson.
Oh yeah,
I would assume it's got to be close to like 40% of the league, if not
because it's a really easy thing to recruit too. Oh, the guy's 350, 6'4", and runs a 4.9. Yeah,
and it's all consolidated in essentially like 4 or 5 teams.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I'm up next.
Yeah,
give me Nick Jackson, and I think this guy could have gone higher. I especially in the last 6 games of his season, he was a completely different player. And we mentioned kind of the struggles he had in the first 6 games where, he's turning his back to the QB in the Western Michigan game where actually a ball's going out to his numbers on the back of his jersey. He had 2 really bad breakdowns in the Western Michigan game in terms of like QB reads early in that game and just like not playing his fits, not playing his role.
He was late to stuff against Iowa State too.
Yeah, and just wasn't playing a complete, game. And we kind of anticipated that going into the year. But the level of growth we saw from him from game 1 to game 12, like all those past years that he developed confidence, kind of understanding how to watch film. And it might not have played out early, but like his growth from game 1 to game 12 is probably the most improved player in the defense. And to bring him back at this age, and I'm guessing he came back, he's like, in 1 year at Iowa, I got exponentially better than I was at Virginia. And he's just seeing like, what if I do another year at Iowa? Like I have a real chance at the NFL. And if we're going to talk about actual NFL draft picks, he's going to have the kind of shuttle and 40 and all the kind of
he's definitely
drills.
The speed guy between him and Higgins.
Right. So there could be some team that talks themselves into like a weak side opportunity with him.
I think he gets drafted.
I think, 6th, 7th round or UDFA, they're like, he has a good chance of making the team on special teams. And I think that's where I see him.
Well, we talk about that invitation to the flat. Having a guy like him at weak side, we brought this up prior to the season. I was super excited about him just because the speed and tackling ability he had in the flat.
Mm-hmm.
He is just the perfect weak side build for this system.
Yeah.
He has comfortability with shooting gaps between C, B, and A. But then if you put him out into space and D, it's an auto tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to allow Phil to play such passive sets over and over and over again. And it's difficult for these QBs to sort through these problems because you're looking at, 6 defenders at 8 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at linebackers way off the ball. Everything seems easy and open, but then the minute the ball is snapped, these guys start moving into their positions and everything evaporates so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Unless QBs, have experience against the system or are very confident in themselves and what they're seeing, you're going to see a lot of checkdowns to, 2 and 3 yard gains. And that is just not sustainable over and over again. And that's why I agree with Fifth because he's, again, weak side linebacker allows for a lot of play calls to benefit our team. Mm-hmm. Having a real stud there. We haven't had a ton of studs there.
Definitely.
You've had guys who've been really good at football, Seth Benson,
mm-hmm.
Kyle Fisher, guys like that. But you haven't had
the athlete.
A guy who's got 400 career tackles at weak side.
Yeah, at age 24 now.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Yeah. All right, you're up next.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
I will go with Brian Allen.
Nice.
And it's under the same guys. I think D tackle, we're going to keep on hammering this home, but we are very thin at D tackle. You might not want to lean on Pittman as your backup one technique this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's probably going to be ready. He had some pretty rough reps at some points in the season. Tennessee, he looked very poor at some points.
Mm-hmm.
But if Brian Allen emerges as a 3 tech and you're comfortable bumping Graves down to the 1, Brian Allen is going to become an integral part of this defense very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And as we just mentioned, D tackle is at the highest level of importance with our system. also within our pass rush game. We don't really have a high-end D-end who you're going to isolate and beg to be rushing the passer at every opportunity. Having a dude at the 3 tech who's going to be manned up, who has pass rush ability, could be how we unlock this pass rush.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why I would draft him in the same spot or this high. It's because he provides 2 massive needs for this team. I think you circle the first concern is D tackle depth. Like, who's going to be that 3rd D tackle, 4th D tackle? Pittman, as we mentioned, backup D tackle struggle all the time, but he didn't ever really have a rep last year where you felt comfortable with him playing big snaps this year. And Brian can be that guy. He can be that 3rd D tackle you can rotate in at the 3 tech, give Grays an opportunity to bounce down to the 1 tech or get off the field. And you have a 3-man rotation. Also, like you said, like, we don't have a pass rusher this year. Herkin and Craig they don't have a consistent pass rusher.
They played enough to we know that they're not going to develop something crazy out of nowhere.
Right. They're not the twitchiest guys.
Not the longest, too. I think their issue is their length.
Yeah, they're both like 6'3", 6'2".
Yeah.
And Brian has the opportunity to create either a bull rush move that's extremely dominant at the 3 tech or at the DN spot, or be twitchy enough to get outside. Like, we saw twitchy plays all the time in that spring game. He dominated. Maybe it's a fall camp.
I think it was
Kids Day.
We've seen both. 2 times he's been
right. So you're
really popping off the screen.
You're solving 2 problems with 1 player. And if he does become that solve and he comes and becomes a great player this year, like, he could go 2nd overall in this draft next year, just based on his makeup and his NFL potential.
Well, then worst case scenario, you have an injury at D tackle. Your defense doesn't fall apart because you have this plug you can stick in.
Exactly. Well, I think I'm up next now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go another unheralded guy, Quinn Schulte. And we've already brought him up once with the safety play with Wampa and not being beat over the top. Schulte is essentially came in and played perfect free safety ball for Iowa. He has moments where he just gets decimated by, Braylon Allen just runs him over 3 straight times and jukes him. But he's never been out of position. He's been unreal with his audibles during the plays, during motions and switches. You can tell he communicates very clearly and very quickly. They're essentially the quarterback there and communicating the back coverage on for all 7 players. And he never loses depth on anything. I think I've seen him beat deep once against Marvin Harrison in like 2022, but can't remember the other time he's been beat over the top.
I think the only other time would be that, stick and go that Western Michigan hit on him with the tight end.
Oh, yeah.
But that's Western Michigan, that wasn't a backbreaking play. He was playing probably a little more aggressive because his offense hasn't
shown anything yet.
That dangerous. But yeah, I would just reiterate you can tell he has such a fundamental understanding of when motions occur, what tells what plays are likely to happen. You'll see him all of a sudden a motion will occur and he'll call it out. The whole defense will shift and you'll have essentially a blitzing linebacker coming off C right into where the play is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the exact outgrowth of him as free safety.
Yeah.
Because we've had, there's always been adjustments. There's always been audibles that free safeties call based on alignment, but it hasn't been as exceptional as it has been under Schulte.
Yeah.
And then it's just interesting. Like they have so many different renditions of the defense since he's started playing free safety. Like that might just be Phil being in the system longer, but it feels like they've gotten more complicated as he's taken over. Yeah. And that might be a product of having a really brilliant guy back there, son of a high school football coach, played QB in high school.
Yeah. And I think actually random thought, but losing Logan Lee on the D tackle, and one of the key plays our D line made last year was those downshifts in the eagle down that would draw off sides. I think there was like 10 or 12 downshifts that drew the offense off sides, like on 1st and 2nd, or 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. It'll be interesting if we keep that going in this year. Like I remember breaking down Graves and Black. It's like, if those guys are not doing that, that was really critical parts of the year last year against Rutgers.
It's won multiple games.
Yeah.
And it's a real part of our strategy. I don't think there's no way they do away with it just because that is how Iowa football makes its hay.
Yeah.
Is being exceptional in short yardage, having little games they can play at all these different moments. When the biggest play needs to be made, you can have a team that can execute a move like formation shift like that.
And to give more context what this is, so you're generally in a jumbo set, defense is in goal line, and you have the offense, they obviously have a snap count. And the D tackles end up learning the snap count, but there is a rule against that where it's called disconcerting signals, where the defensive line cannot mimic the offensive line snap count. Iowa's found a way to have a disconcerting signal, but they cues up with a downshifter off a defensive line, so it's okay. As long as you call out something that simultaneously you shift with it, it's not an actual.
Well, I also think they do it alongside the QB's cadence. So the first count is when they move.
Yeah, or I think the QB starts his count and then they have their second count when his second count.
Which is
it's brilliant.
Yeah. For an O lineman to hear a cadence and then movement from everyone, and you think I missed the count.
Yeah, you think, and the crowd's going too.
Yeah.
And then you see 4 guys move simultaneously. You don't see 4 linemen shift like that. It's just such a small football thing, but like it's the brilliance of Iowa football. It's all in the margins of how they play.
I mean, I could think of so many drives and critical moments. You mentioned Rutgers. Rutgers happened at a huge moment in the game when it was still a close game, and they were able to execute one of those on a 4th and 1.
Yeah. Michigan did it. I mean, we stopped Michigan to a field goal in their first drive based on just one of those shifts. Just like, all right, game on now.
Yep.
I was like, that was big. Who did you just draft? I just drafted Schulte, so you're up now.
Yeah. I think we should have probably drafted Jamari Harris earlier. He had a bit of a lackluster season last year, but he's coming off an ACL tear. Anytime you're opposite a stud corner, you're going to look not great because you're just going to see the lion's share of the targets, and eventually teams are going to have success against you. Go back to Greg Maben, who stuck in the league for I think like 6 years.
Maybe more than that.
But he was opposite Desmond King for 3 seasons, and he was kind of Iowa's whipping boy because all this guy's giving up 80 yards a game in receiving yards. But Jamari had the unlikely or the unlucky role of being opposite Cooper and receiving a lot of targets. And then also coming off of his injury, he just didn't play as fast. You could tell he was guessing a little bit at points. He got beat on a double move against Western Michigan.
Yeah.
He does lack speed to a certain degree. He's not the fastest guy. But moving back to this Phil Parker philosophy, he is the perfect corner for what we want to do. You can back him up. He can play through a receiver's face. He can tackle in the flats. He's got enough high-end speed where you're not worried about getting beat over the top. They did play him in a fair amount of press coverage later in the season. I think after Penn State, that was a little bit nauseating for Phil just to give up, curl route after curl route. And you saw them move into more of a press look out of there. But I don't think he's going to be a drafted corner. But
it'll be close.
It could change if he has a huge season.
Yeah, and I think if you would have told me after the 2021 season that he would have turned into an All Big Ten corner, I would have believed you instantly. Especially that Kentucky game, the last game of his 2021 year. I think he had a massive pick to essentially seal the game before we blew it down the stretch. And his last 4 or 5 games that season, he just kept on growing, and he he fit the mold of what we want to do so much that last year was surprising to see him kind of struggle the way he did and not really have any splash plays that were, what we expected.
High-end corner play.
Right. And if he all of a sudden, got more confidence, got healthier and bounced back this year and had an All Big Ten year and got drafted in the 5th round, like where Ojemudia did, where Riley Moss did, I'd be like, yeah, of course. That's where he always was. He just had a weird part of his career where he tore his ACL and got suspended and lost his confidence. So I think it is concerning a little bit for an Iowa defense to not have a cornerback drafted this early or at this late of a stage of a top 10 player draft. I mean, we are always producing high level corners. And if you can circle one thing this year of maybe why Iowa defense is it takes a dip, even though it's so old and so, essentially dependable over the last 4 years, is that the high level cornerback play just isn't there. And if it isn't there, this system, it kind of falls apart, not quickly, but it won't look as it should because you're going to be giving up 8-yard curls on 3rd and 6s. You're not going to have the interceptions that flip the Purdue game or the Rutgers game in 2022. You're not going to have these kind of splash plays that what has made Iowa defense its kind of core identity.
Well, I think I push back on that a little bit just because yes, you might be less effective between the 20s. You might not get as many stops. You might be able to keep guys backed up as much as you want. But just based on how passive the defense is and how much we protect our guys, once you get to the red zone, he's a great red zone corner. He's going to tackle super well. He's big enough to handle any jump ball against him.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the opposite corner at some point. I think they're eventually going to move back to guys similar to him rather than Lee. But even without high-level cornerback play, this team can be still so dominant because once you get inside the 20, the strength of this team is going to really show with how well it tackles, how organized it is in the back end. There's not going to be any confusion. They're not going to be able to slip something by you.
Yeah.
So while we might not have as many interceptions we usually have, we might give up more yards. I still think when it comes to allowing points, it's going to still be at a high level because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just not going to be. It's between the 20s. You need that cornerback play. That's how you get out the field. I'm going to go with Ethan Hurkett as my next pick. Once again, his pass rush is not going to blow you away. He has a good bull rush. He doesn't have any swim moves or spin moves that are going to be flashy, but he plays the run exceptionally well. And rewatching the Nebraska game a few days back, they had a down block play as a classic counter cross block play where, as a DN, when you see your head up tackle leave and he turns to his inside eye and he blocks down the line, like a good DNs, obviously they know that's your key to watch out for a pulling guard, a tight end, a guard, or fullback sometimes. And he reacts to it so quickly. Like, I don't know how he does it. And they teach you to put your two hands on the back of that tackle who is down blocking. And he instantly gets both hands on that tackle and squeezes that hole. So you're, hopefully having, as an offense, you want that kick out block to drive him to C, D gap into the sideline. But he doesn't even give them an edge. And a great play in that situation is to just take the hit block head up and bounce it, two gaps farther. Have the corner make a play, have the middle linebacker reach it, or a safety come up. He ends up making the tackle too. So you think about a situation where, we played DN. If you actually would have made a play on the running back as a pulling guard was coming, it's an A++ play in the run game. And I think that's what we can expect from him all year.
Well, and he's another guy we probably should have higher too, because he is such an exceptional run defender. Mm-hmm. The play that ended the Iowa State game has a play going opposite of him. He gets inside of his block, beats it, makes the tackle. Granted, he has Castro forcing it, but still, you go back and watch the play. It's just exceptional. And he's just so technically sound. Mm-hmm. And the reason he got on the field so early is because he plays the system so well. The reason he probably won't end up being an NFL draft pick is just because there isn't much high-end pass rush potential, and that's just a huge part of playing the end. You could end up seeing him probably moving to an outside linebacker. Maybe you take...
I think it's more likely he moves to offense. I think he might do the Hesse role.
Go fullback.
Go play fullback, go play tight end, where there's that kind of size and build makes more sense rather than the elite level that you have to be at.
Because he is that 6'3". He doesn't have the arm length and all that stuff to play your typical level.
Joe Evans, both those guys, he's kind of in line with Evans and who's got players mentioned?
Parker Hesse.
Yeah. It's kind of the same guy.
Yeah, so for the last one here, I think we'll go with he's not even a starter. We might not see him this year if Lee takes a step. I have my concerns with Deshaun Lee is that we've made these broader points about how with off coverage you invite stuff to the flat. With Lee, you're kind of handcuffed into playing him with press man because you don't want to give him receivers a lot of space, tight ends a lot of space to get their hands on him. But he has the speed to stay with anyone. I think where he's going to really be beneficial is in a dime coverage where you can put him on the field against scatty guys.
And I still think he could turn into a good corner in our system. It comes down to he was a redshirt freshman last year, and he didn't break the one rule. He didn't get beat deep.
Well,
one time he got beat deep on a not really a true quarters defensive play. It was all out blitz for Nebraska. And I'd rather have a guy on his back foot than on his front foot in his first year. If he doesn't make that step where he can start jumping curls and jumping flat defenders
he's got to be a super high-end cover corner.
Anticipation. He needs unreal anticipation.
He needs to get a lot stronger. My concern is with how much we leave those guys out on an island, you're going to see a ton of jump balls go his way just because of his size.
Well, it's bubbles too.
And bubbles. Yeah. Everything's going to be targeted at him this year if he's on the field. Mm-hmm. Who I want to be the next guy, and we didn't draft him that high actually in our recruiting class. We were really high on him, but we had some concerns about speed, is John Nestor. Mm-hmm. And you can almost throw in Kane Entringer. I don't think they see him as a corner, but he could be a guy in an injury segment to move out there. But he has that prototypical size you want to see out there.
Yeah.
But John, I think, is closer to 6'1", maybe even 6'2", has that weight to him. You can play him 7 yards off the ball. But like I mentioned, we had him clocked as a mid 4.5 guy, but he's a gunner on punt.
Yeah.
So he's obviously one of the fastest guys on the team. From what we saw in his recruiting film is we haven't seen a processor like that at the corner position who was that sophisticated in coverage, understood where stuff was coming from. We were just really blown away by how sophisticated of a player he was as a senior in high school.
Yeah.
There's a reason he rose so fast within the ranks is because he has that natural football talent. He's going to be a great tackler at his size. I think if you want to play Iowa football and you want to go to the point where you have these, 5 extra linebackers on the field and Schulte with your DB room, you go John Nestor.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to answer the last cornerback question.
Yeah.
Jamari is clearly one corner, but we have a lot of options for that fourth corner. Obviously, Jalen Watson's coming in, and he has probably the best physical pedigree of all 4 of them that are going to be vying for that. We loved Entringer's film. He's getting older in the system. He's starting to flash in small areas like the punt return play against Michigan. And then you have Nestor, and then also like the forgotten guys, TJ Hall too, who got on the field first of all these guys. And another guy, we love this film. We love this fluidity. So you really have 4 corners that are all old enough now. You'd feel comfortable with them playing for one cornerback spot. It'd just be interesting who ends up winning that job.
Yeah, even after Jamari graduates, they're going to be in great position regardless.
Yeah.
But I think it's such an interesting defense to evaluate because we've just never had this experience of a defense come back.
Yeah.
And I think we made this point before the broadcast, but I think the defense knew how close they were. If the offense didn't completely get derailed by injury, they would have been in a very competitive game in that Big Ten championship against the eventual national champions. And that was because of how well the defense played. And granted, yes, the Tennessee game looked rough. I'll chalk that up to being, lack of motivation. They were in it early. They played well early. Once D can throw a couple pick sixes or a couple picks, their willpower kind of faded. But if you look at the rest of the season, outside of likely being just a touch too passive against Penn State, it was a complete wire-to-wire act.
Yeah.
And they are going to be, in these first 6 games, outside of Ohio State, I think could hold every team to under 16 points. Washington, they're going to be breaking a new system. I don't think Iowa State's putting anyone on the field that we're worried about or is going to have the O-line to beat us. Minnesota, likely going to have the O-line talent, but is their QB going to push any buttons to us? They have high-end receiver play, but they've been so poor against us in the red zone that I don't think any of these teams are scoring multiple touchdowns.
We tweeted about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, was just the random depth this team has on the defense side of the ball. You have Llewellyn, who we didn't draft. And you talk about a player we really liked, his recruiting film. And is he a redshirt junior now?
Yeah.
And still hasn't seen starting minutes or starting snaps that impact the game. And having him as a depth at the end is just massive.
Yeah, in case of injury, he's perfect.
I would say 95% of Power 5 major conference teams, he'd be playing starter snaps. And he's just in a rotation for Iowa. And if we have a major injury at the end, he'd come in and play very well.
Yeah.
Has a chance to make the NFL. Then you think of
he might be the best prototypical pass rusher on the team just because of his length. Yeah. We mentioned with Craig and Herkett and Allen, none of those guys are going to be able to utilize every move just because of the length they don't have.
He's the full package.
He's a full package.
Yeah. And then you think of another player that was going to be the starting middle linebacker this year, but before Higgins and Jackson came back. Shire was another guy we've loved for 4 years, has a massive hit on the kickoff against Minnesota. Just sitting, just a 2-deep linebacker with, probably not going to even rotate this year. But if Higgins goes down, he'll play 90% of well as Higgins would, in my opinion, just like what we've seen from him already and our expectations. And then you have Entringer and Hall and Brian Allen, 3 other guys that
Lutmer's sitting in the background.
But I'm talking about guys who are 3 years in the program. Brian Allen, TJ Hall, and Entringer, probably the best defensive recruits in their class on a defensive team.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting. They're playing dime, maybe. They're playing punt. So you have these 5 guys that are just third-year players, not even in the starting lineup. But if you started all of them and they played for 2 years, they'd be NFL draft picks. And so it's this really strange year where the defense, it might not have the star talent with Cooper DeJean and, past defensive head, Van Ness, but you have insane depth. Not even just good depth. You have NFL players, NFL upperclassmen might not see the field.
Yeah.
And that's just a really weird spot to be in as a program.
Well, I think that just points to the success they're going to have over the season.
Yeah.
And, you might be able to get into some games where a guy's a little bit dinged up. Higgins has an ankle, Jackson has an ankle, Graves has an ankle injury.
Mm-hmm.
In a usual season, they would be playing through it, but you're going to feel comfortable playing these other guys for a game.
Yeah.
I like Zach Lutmer.
Yeah.
Guy we drafted number 1 in the recruiting class prior. He's going to be a guy that likely is our backup free safety this year. God forbid, again, if something happened to Schulte or X, you have Entringer as a backup strong safety.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a piece that you can go anywhere. You could have injuries to 9 guys, and you're still probably throwing out a top 15 defense at worst.
It's just literally D tackle.
Yeah.
We cannot have injuries at D tackle.
Can't have 2 injuries at D tackle.
Yeah. It's going to be another great defensive year. It's going to be another top 5 unit. It's going to be interesting. You had some Washington, UCLA, some Pac-12 offenses. We'll see how we adjust to that. But I think it's going to be, if they finish top 5 and win us 10 games because the offense against us can't score more than 14, we wouldn't be surprised.
Yep. Awesome. Well, go Hawks.
Yep. Go Hawks.